The question says a particular brand of oil passes through three processes. In a week, 500 bottles were produced. The cost books show the following information: material, labor, direct expenses, cost of bottle, cost of costs. The indirect expenses for the period were 1600. The byproduct were sold for rupees 350 in process 2 and the residue was sold for rupees 200 in process 3. Prepare process accounts. So first process is process 1. So as usual, we will study the format, particular tab, it is amount. This is process 1. Control B. We have process 1. Again control B. Now, we all know all the expenses we record on the debit side. For process 1, material, we will write 2 material. 2 materials we have for process 1, 4500. Next is 2 labor. 2 labor we have 3000. Next is 2 direct expenses. 2 direct expenses we have 1000 for process 1. Now, next is 2 indirect expenses. 2 indirect expenses. See, we haven't been mentioned in the question regarding the indirect expenses. It has been simply mentioned the indirect expenses for the period were 1600. Now, how we will divide this 1600 in three process? If we do not have any mention of indirect expenses, we usually divide it on the basis of labor. The ratio is 6 is to 5 is to 5. So for process A, indirect expenses, that is 1600 into 6 divided by 16 will give you 600. Next is by process 2. By process 2 at the rate of rupees 18.20 per bottle. So it will be 9100. And here also, if we will do the total, it will be 9100. Next is process 2. Process 2. For process 2, again we will make up this particular format. And we have to record all the expenses as it is. So in order to save time, we will just copy it. Now, first thing is 18.20 bottle is like 9100 divided by 500 bottles will give you 18.20 per bottle. Now, this particular, as we know, when we are preparing the process costing, the closing balance of one, that is the total expense of one process, pass on to the another process. Okay. So we will write process 1. This is process 1, and we have transferred the total expenses of process 1 as an opening balance in process 2. So therefore we will write to process 1. Material, we know they are it has been mentioned in the question, they are 2000. Next is 2500. 2500. Next is we have 500. Indirect expenses, we all know in this particular process we have 2500 expenses as direct labor. So the ratio for this process will come out to be 1600 into 5 divided by 16, which will comes out to be 500. Now what they are saying, so the cost of bottles will come out to be 2000. It has been mentioned in the question, as you can see, cost of bottle in the process 2 is 2000. So we will record, as it has been shown, that additional cost of bottles is 2000 in process 2. So it's becomes mandatory for us to mention this 2000 cost in process 2. Now, by sale of products. By sale of products. Sale of products, we all know it is given in the question. You can read it, that the byproduct was sold for rupees 350 in process 2. Now this particular expenses total, if we will do, it will come of all these expenses will come out to be 16,600. Now this 16,600 will be transferred in process. Sorry, there is certain calculation mistake, no problem. This is 16,006. It won't be 16,600, but from 16,600, we will deduct this 350 because some byproduct has been sold in this particular process. So 16,600 minus 350 will give you by process 3 at the rate of rupees 32.50 per bottle. At the rate of rupees 32.50 per bottle, which will be 16, 20, 50. So the total comes out to be 16,600. Next is process 3. Now we will go for process 3. Process 3 is process 3. This particular, we will copy the format as it is. There is no change in the format. Now, this particular expenses, that is 16, 20, 50, will from process 2 will be transferred in the credit side of process 3. To process 2, we have 16 to 50. Now next is two materials. Two materials we have been given in the question as for process 3, 1500. Next is two labor. Two labor which is given in the question as again 2500. to labor, which is given in the question as 2500. Now, to direct expenses. To direct expenses. Direct expenses are given in the question as 1000. Now again, the indirect expenses. Indirect expenses for this particular process will be calculated as per ratio, which is 6 by 16. It will give you, sorry, it is 5 by 16. It is not 6 by 16, 5 by 16, which will be 500. Next is to cost of COGS. Cost of COGS in process 3 is 250. Then we will again copy it over here. Cost of COGS is 250. Now, by sale of residue. By sale of residue. Sale of residue which has been done in the process 3. You can see it has been mentioned and the residue was sold for rupees 200. Now, if we will add all this, we will get the amount of 22,000. Next is by finished stock account. Now, if we will, now there is no further process which has been carried on in this particular, after this particular process. Now we will get finished stock, that is a product is complete and the amount is transferred to the finished stock account at the rate of rupees 43.50 per bottle. So it will be 21,750. So this is your 21,750 and which comes out 22,000 minus 250. Sorry, it's not 200, it is 250. So the total cost again in the closing balance we will write 22,000. So the final cost which comes out in process 3 is 21,750 of process in process 3. So in case if you have not understood it properly or there is some concept which has been missed by you, no problem, I will repeat it for you again. A particular brand of oil passes through 3 processes. In a week, 500 bottles were produced. So we have been given this question and we have been given all the expenses, and it is also mentioned in the question about the expenses in process 1, 2 and 3. And there are additional information. The indirect expenses for the period were 1600. The byproduct was sold for rupees 350 and the residue was sold for rupees 300. Prepare a process account. First, we will focus on process 1. Output is 500 bottle. So whenever we have to find out the price per unit, we will divide the total cost divided by 500. We have particular amount. This is a debit side and this is a credit side. We will record all the expenses on the debit side as we have recorded in material, labor, direct expenses. It has been mentioned in the question, the indirect expenses for the period were 1600. Now it has not been mentioned that how much of the 1600 has to be divided in process 1, 2 and 3 accordingly. So we will take on another method. We will divide 1600 on the basis of labor ratio, which comes up to be 655, that is 6 is to 5 is to 5. So what we will do, indirect expenses for this particular process 1 will be 6 by 16, which comes out to be 1600. The total of the cost of process 1 is 9100 at the rate of 18.20 per bottle, which will be transferred to process 2 in the debit side, and it will be a opening balance for the process 2, and we will write it with two write means uh, specify it with two process 1 9100. Similarly, material, labor, direct expenses and indirect expenses have been recorded as they have been mentioned. Now there is additional information regarding process 2 is given. The products were sold for rupees 350 and the cost of bottle in process 2 were rupees 2000. So cost of bottle for for 2000 has been mentioned in process 2. We will add all these and we will get 16,600. Now sale of product is rupees 350. So 16,600 minus 350 will give you 16,250. So 16,600 we will deduct sale of product and we will get the 16,250 in process 2, and this will be transferred to process 3. Now in process 3, it will be transferred in the name of process 2, 16,250. Then all those expenses are same like material, labor and direct expenses. Direct expenses are not mentioned in process 3, so we will not record. I think there is certain mistake which I think there is no mention of in the question, but no problem. It is 1000, you corrected, and indirect expenses are 500. So we will, I think there is certain misprint in the book itself. It is 1000. So in process 3, we have 1000 is direct expenses. Indirect expenses, again, they are divided on the labor ratio. Now they are in 500 and the cost of costs is 250. In process 3, we will record cost of costs 250 by sale of residue, and the residue was sold for rupees 200. So it will be, it is not 200 actually, it is 250. So we will correct it. Let me correct it for you. It is 250. This is not happening. No problem. So it is 250. We will mention 250 over here, and from 250, 22,000 we will deduct 250, and we will get the by finished stock account 21,750, and the total cost comes out to be 22,000. So now we can assume that finished stock account, because further there is no process involved and this was the final process where the product was completed. So the final cost comes out to be 21,750.